Now we get into the talk story part of the evening, where we talk about Hawaiian culture, history, legend, language, healing, and the philosophy that we call Huna, based on 7 ideas about life. That the world is what you think it is. There are no limits. Energy flows where attention goes. Now is the moment of power. To love is to be happy with. All power comes from within. And effectiveness is the measure of truth. We talk about all these things in different ways. In the way that I was brought up to ask a lot of questions. I was also brought up by being told a lot of stories. So I'd like to begin the evening with telling you an old Hawaiian legend. This legend is called the Magic Banana. Takes place on the Big Island. Over there on the Big Island, there used to be a very small fishing village in reasonably modern times called Kalapana. It's a very, very old village, go back many, many centuries as far as there being people living there. In more modern times, it started to become a residential community. Never very big, but, noticeable. Nearby was a most beautiful black sand beach. Now, when we say in Hawaii a black sand beach, what happens sometimes when the fresh lava is coming down from the mountain and it hits the cold ocean water, that instantly solidifies and bursts into very, very tiny little beads of black lava, very shiny. And this is so small that it's called black sand. And it looks like sand. And there are beaches covered with this very, very black sand for all practical purposes. A terrible thing to walk on in the summer, okay? Really, really hot. But there used to be this beautiful curved black sand beach. They had posters about it. It was a beautiful spot. In 1990, however, for our modern times, the Kilauea volcano produced a new vent that came roaring down the mountainside. Well, it roared. Coming down the mountainside is fairly slow, but it still just kept pouring out lava and pouring out lava and pouring out lava, and it started to hit the edge of the town. And then it started to go through the town. This is between April and June of 1990. And I had some friends that lived there. It's just a little modern historical background. Had some friends that lived there, and their information, local information on the radio and the scientific explanations was that maybe in 6 months it might start spilling into the bay, this Kalapana Bay. So they went to work, came home that night, and the whole village had been inundated and the entire bay was gone. One night. Totally filled up. So we don't have Kalapana Beach anymore. And Kalapana Village is an archaeological dig at the present time, under large things of lava. But in the very, very old days, there were thriving communities there. Lots of different households, because that's what the Hawaiians used to live in. Not villages really, but households, compounds, scattered in a particular area. And in this area, this long time ago time that we're talking about, time of magic and mystery and adventure, there lived a young man whose name was Kukali. And Kukali, in many ways, was very fortunate because his father was a kahuna Kupua. Now, kahuna is a master. Kupua is a form of shaman. Sometimes it's described as a wizard. And Kukali's father was an extremely wise and knowledgeable wizard. And so as Kukali grew up, his father taught him lots of different things. Taught him all kinds of chants and magical spells. Taught him how to build canoes. Taught him how to find the right kinds of rocks and carve them into different tools and weapons. Because, you don't just go out and find any rock. Here in these islands, we have a kind of rock called basalt. extremely dense. It's actually a kind of crystal, only it's not clear at all. As a matter of fact, looks like this. Okay, this is basalt crystal, extremely heavy and dense. This is what they made the best tools and the sharpest weapons out of. So anyway, Kukali's father taught him how to make different things out of that kind of stone. And finally, as he got to a certain age, his father gave him a special gift. He presented him with a banana. Now, Kukali had seen lots and lots of bananas, and eaten an awful lot of bananas, so he wasn't too impressed at first. But then his father told him, peel the banana and eat it, and keep the peel very carefully. So he peeled the banana, ate it, delicious banana. In the old days of Hawaii, they used to have 80 different varieties of bananas. Okay? This was even another variety. So he peeled it, he ate it, carefully put the skin back together, and put it away. And then when he went to look at it again, it had filled out into a full banana again. Didn't take very long at all. So that was the magic banana. As long as he kept this and took care of the skin, he would never run out of food. So he grew up, and as he grew up, he started hearing stories of far-off lands and different places that people had been to, and he decided he wanted to go traveling. So one day he went up in the forest, found the right trees, cut them down, brought them down to the shore, put them all together, built an ocean-going canoe, gathered all of his supplies and his magic banana, and took off over the ocean all by himself. And he wanted to travel and see the most strange lands he could. And he stopped at a lot of different islands and had lots of different adventures. But he finally, as he was getting real tired after one long stretch across the ocean, he came up on a beach, lay down to rest. While he lay down to rest, something was happening, but he didn't know what. He slept for a long time, and when he woke up, he was in this valley, far away from any beach. The valley had walls of cliffs all the way around it, and he was stuck there. And as he got up and looked around, he saw that there were other people. Some of them looked fairly healthy. Many of them were sick. Some of them were starving. And he had to finally start asking people what was going on. This valley belonged to a bird god, a gigantic bird called Halulu. And Halulu is a word that means roaring thunder. But anyway, Halulu lived up on the top of the cliffs, and he kept this valley as a prison. And he would bring people into this valley and just kind of keep them there like they were in a cattle pen. Now, Halulu was huge, really big. And he had a strange quality, because he was not just a bird, he was a bird god. Every feather had claws on it. And what he would do every morning, he would send one of his great wings brushing down over the whole valley to find anybody who had fallen, because he didn't like the fresh, healthy people. He wanted the ones that had gotten old and sick and were either had died or were about to. So his wings spread over, and he would grab these up and bring them up to the top of the cliff for his feast. Well, Kukali decided, they definitely had to get out of there, but how were they going to do it? Well, the first thing he did, because there was nothing to eat in the valley, and no way to grow food or anything like that. So first thing he did is he got out his magic banana, and he fed everybody. And every day he made sure that everybody was fed until the men who were there in the valley started getting strong and healthy. And fewer were dying off. Then he taught them how to cut stone and how to make weapons. And so when were all very strong and they were all very healthy and they all had all their weapons ready, he said, now it's time. Because they waited, there kept the wing, but it didn't pick up anything because no one was dead and no one was sick. And it swept the valley again. And you heard a big screaming cry from Halulu, who was very, very angry by this point. And then he really swept it again, and this time as it was sweeping around, Kukali gave the signal, and all the men went rushing out with their weapons and attacked the feathers of Halulu. And they fought, and the feathers fought back, and they fought over one side of the valley and over the other side of the valley, back and forth, and gradually the whole wing was defeated. And Halulu screamed this intensely loud and sent down his other wing to attack the men. And the men attacked again, and with Kukali leading them and giving all kinds of magical chants to protect them. You know, he just didn't leave everything to chance. He also used chants. Get it? Get it? Get it? Okay. So as he was chanting and as they were attacking, they finally defeated the second wing. And then Halulu sent down his leg, because all the scales on his legs had claws, and his legs were huge. And they attacked that until they cut all the legs up to pieces. The second leg come down, and they cut that to pieces. Finally, the bird himself jumped down, and all the men leaped on top of him and cut the bird completely to pieces. Then they used their weapons now as tools, and they cut steps in the cliff. And they went all the way back up to the top of the cliff. And from there, they cut trees, threw all the trees down in the valley to cover up Halulu. And then Kukali built a fire, and they threw the burning fire down in there to set fire to all of the leaves, and this monster was completely burned. Except for 2 breast feathers that escaped the flames and flew off to Halulu's sister. On a far part of the island, Halulu had a sister called Namakaeha, and she was a relative of Pele. And she saw them, and as soon as she smelled the smoke on these feathers, why, she knew her brother was dead. And so she got very, very angry and set out to figure out a way to trap whoever did it. And so she sent her priests out, who were regular human beings, and to start telling rumors about this fabulous place over on one side of the island. And gradually Kukali heard about it because he was off getting ready to wander again and find strange things and adventures. So he was finally led to this place, and he looked and climbed up, and there was this huge, that seemed like a bottomless pit. And as he was standing there looking at it, one of Namakaeha's priests did a chant to send up the wind and caught Kukali from the back and pushed him over the edge, and now he's falling down. And he's falling and he's falling and he's falling, but he does his own chant. He calls out to Ku. His name was Kukali, but he also worshipped the god Ku in those days. And what he said was, E Ku, E Ho'umale, E Ho'umalu, Ya'u. That was a magical chant that meant, Ku, protect me. Okay? And Ku did protect him, because even though he was falling down and normally he would have died, his fall got softer and softer, and he landed in a pool of Waiola, the water of life. And even though he was, very roughed up from the fall, why, he landed in there, he was completely healed and brought all the way back to life. So he jumped out of the pool and met one of the kahunas who was so impressed that he made friends with Kukali instead of being his enemy. And he told him, you can't help it, you're going to meet Namakaeha, and whatever you do, don't eat any of the fruit that she gives you, because then you'll be trapped here forever. So some of her kahunas went and did battle with him, and he fought them and defeated them. Others made friends with him. And he gathered them to his side. And finally, after long battles and friendships and lots more adventures, he finally reaches the place where Namakaeha lives. And at first, of course, she tried to conquer him and defeat him, but when she found she couldn't, she made peace with him. And gradually, over a period of time, they even married. And she tried to give him the food. This is what happened. She tried to give him all the fruits and everything so he would eat them, just trying, pretending to be nice. And he would take them happily. But the men, you remember, in old Hawaiian tradition, had to eat separately from the women. So he would take the food and go into the eating hut and pull out his magic banana. And that's what he would eat all the time. And then he would bury the food so it looked like he had eaten it. Okay? But he never touched her food. And she thought he must be a very powerful wizard because she would give him all of this poisoned food and he never got sick. So finally she started changing her mind about him. And like I said, they finally got married. And then one day, Kukali got homesick, talked her into going with him, and they left and traveled back to Hawaii and lived happily ever after. And that's the story of the magic banana. Now, lots of interesting things we can learn from this. One of the things, of course, there are some things about Hawaiian culture. The ideas and beliefs about magic, like many other cultures have. Right? The Hawaiians shared those kinds of things too. The idea of a hero, one of the main characteristics of a hero in any culture is the wanting to go off on an adventure, sometimes being forced to, but most often wanting to. And so there was that too. But in the course of the adventure, Kukali had grown up learning things. And he didn't forget what he learned. He found occasion to use everything that he had learned from his father. All of the different skills served him well. And he didn't just try to save himself. This is an important aspect here, because there's a lot of aloha in this story. Not from Honolulu, but when the first thing he thought of was not just to sneak out and use his own skills to get out of that valley while everybody else was down there, but to give food to them, to share with them, to make them all strong, to defeat the monster together. Because he wouldn't have had to defeat the monster to escape. But he saw what the monster was doing to all of these people, and so they worked together and did this. Then the people helped him afterwards. Then when he found Namakaeha, he didn't just go in there and try to destroy everybody. Wherever he could, he made friends. And he did make friends. And so even some of the people who were his enemies became his friends and his supporters. And even the ultimate enemy, the sister of the monster that he defeated, finally became his loving wife with Aloha. The power of that, even in the stories, even in the tales. Lots of other tales around the world, we don't find very much about that power of love being so strong an element in the story. But in most of the Hawaiian stories, we do. Okay. So now it's open up for questions in the more traditional style, traditional in my family, which is questions about anything that came up in the story, questions about Hawaiian culture of any kind, whatever else happens to come to your mind. Yes?
Well, on the heels of that story, I'd like to hear a definition of aloha.
A definition of aloha. Now, aloha is a word in Hawaiian that's used for many things, many kinds of concepts. The essential translation of the word is love. So that when you're being greeted in Hawaiian and someone says aloha, what they're really saying is love to you. Or if it's a more traditional Hawaiian, he'll say something like aloha kaua or aloha kako, which means love to all of us gathered here. And so generally, the word means love. But in Hawaiian concept of this, love is only positive. There are no negative aspects to love at all. There is love, the word aloha is also used to mean mercy, compassion, friendship, all the loving kinds of things that someone would do for another person. Right? And so that's why it's also used as a greeting. So this is what love is all about. And in the story that we just talked about, compassion was one of the strong elements. Yeah. Yes?
In the story, the name of the sister was Namaka Eha, which means 4 eyes. Is there an additional sort of level of meaning?
Yeah, there usually is.
You know it.
Sure. The Hawaiians had a counting system, mathematical system we could call it, which was based on the number 4. Like in modern times, we use a 10-based system, a decimal system primarily. And we also use the remnants of a Chaldean system from ancient Middle East, in so many things that we have that are multiples of 12. But in old Hawaii, and a lot of other indigenous cultures, they used a 4-based system. Now, 4 was a number that meant life, breath, spirit. So that when this was a part of a name, why it had to do with emphasizing that that quality in the person who's being described. So Namaka Eha could very well be translated as 4 eyes, could also be 4 faces. Okay, wouldn't make any sense, but it could mean 4 beginnings. 4 eyes is most probable. Okay, and it just said she was a source of life and breath and spirit. When they wanted to emphasize tremendous power, why then they would use the number 8. So you might have a person or a creature who was called the 8-eyed chief, or the 8-eyed bat. That meant they had an awful lot of mana, an awful lot of personal power. But Namaka Eha was powerful, but not as powerful as her brother, the Halulu. Yes? Hurt? Angry eyes. That's true. So depending, because sometimes when we're looking at these old stories, in Hawaiian, in order to have proper understanding of a word and pronunciation, you have some marks that were often left out. One of them is called a macron in English, which is and a kahako in Hawaiian, which goes over a vowel. And if you don't have that, you can't ever be too certain. So Susan's right, Eha, if it was Namaka Eha, that would mean just the same kind of name as Queen Lilia Okalan. No? Oh, that's right, I'm sorry. Namaka Eha. Eha would be the number 4. Namaka Eha, like I was pronouncing it, could also mean eyes that hurt, hurting eyes. Queen Lilia Okalani got this name at the beginning of her life because she had a form of conjunctivitis, an infection in her eyes that made them red and made them hurt. And so she was named Hurting Eyes. Okay? So although this is not an element in the story, it's not brought out as being particular description of her, why in the older original versions of the story that may have been there. Okay? So yeah, that's another possibility. We have a lot of Hawaiian names today, old and ancient names. We can never be sure what was intended as far as the meaning. We can guess, but we can never be sure.